This is the first part of our finger crocheting project. And with our finger crocheting, we are going to be making a scarf, just like the one that I have here in front of me. What you are going to be doing is using the ball of yarn that I gave you in class, and the yarn has two ends. So I'm going to slide the ball out of the wrapper, and as I said, there's two ends. So usually there will be one end that is kind of stuck into the middle of the ball, and then the other end is actually on the inside of that ball. And a lot of times when I wind my yarn from this state into a big ball, which makes it a little easier to work with, I like to try to find the end that is inside. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of stick my fingers in and just kind of grab some of the yarn and just gently pull it. And it might seem like a big knot and a big mess, but then usually you're able to locate that end. It might take a little bit of time, but I found my end here. All right. Now what I want to do is I'm just going to roll all of this yarn into a ball. And I like to take it from the center rather than working it from the outside, because the outside end is kind of wound all around, and what will end up happening is your yarn will kind of be rolling all over the place, and this makes it a little more connected and won't be as difficult to wind your ball. So what I like to do is just kind of wrap the end around my finger several times, or quite a few times, and then I'll just start making it into a ball. And as I'm doing that, I'm just kind of rotating it with my fingers so that the yarn is not going in the same place every single time. And I will just do that until I have all of the yarn in a single ball. Our first part for our finger crocheting is going to be creating a slip knot. Now, I find a lot of times it's helpful for beginners to create the slip knot laying on the table rather than holding it up. So what you want to do is you want to have your end, and you want to take the rest of the yarn that's connected to the ball and lay it over top of where your end is. And you do want to leave a pretty long tail. Then what I do is I pick up that loop, and I want to grab the yarn, again, that's connected to the ball of yarn, and bring it through that loop that I've created. And then I'll pull until I end up with a knot. Now, the idea of the slip knot is that it will move. So when I pull that thread or that yarn, it gets tighter, and if I grab the knot and pull the knot, it gets looser. But what we want is to make sure that the yarn that we pull is the one that's connected to the ball. We don't want this end to tighten the slip knot. So you always want to make sure when you're doing your slip knot that when you pull the yarn that's connected to the ball, that is when that loop will tighten. So that is going to be our first stitch in our scarf. Now what we're going to do, I'm just going to have my finger in that loop, and I don't want it super tight. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a chain. And in order to do the chain, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of sneak my thumb into that loop as well. And you don't have to have it completely in the loop, but just enough that you'll be able to grab the yarn, and again, it's the yarn that's connected to the ball, and pull it through. And then you're going to do that again. And again. So that's 3. And I'm going to go all the way to 9. So I've got 3, 4, 5. And I'm trying to keep that loop about the size of my thumb and my pointer finger. 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, so that is my chain. Okay, and that is my first row of stitches. Now, what I want to do is start my second row, and this is where I'm actually going to be creating the crocheting. All right, so we went 9 stitches, and what we want to do is we can't go into this first stitch that has the loop in it. We're going to skip that one, and we're going to start with the loop that's right here. So what we have to do is I'm going to put my pointer finger through there, and I'm going to kind of wrap that yarn around my finger and pull it through. So now I have 2 loops on my finger. And then what I want to do is I'm going to kind of put my thumb through there, grab the yarn, and pull it through. And that creates my first stitch. And then we're going to do it in each of these loops. Okay, so I've got 1 stitch. I'm going to kind of open that loop up a little bit. I'm going to put my pointer finger through. I'm going to wrap and pull it through so I have 2 loops on my finger. And then I'm going to grab the yarn and pull it through. So I'm going to do that all the way across. And just take your time with it. Okay, and you can see I'm kind of pulling that yarn so that it's the same thickness as my finger, or maybe a little bit bigger so I'm able to put my thumb through there. But you don't want to have super big loops because that's going to give you really holy crocheting, and you don't want that. You want to keep everything nice and even. So we're going to go again. So I kind of make that space a little bigger so I can put my finger through. I pull it through. I grab and I pull. Now this row is probably going to be the most difficult one because once you get this second row on, it's going to be a lot easier to be able to tell where the different stitches are. All right, now I've reached the end, and if you take a look, you can see this is what it should look like. It should kind of look like a series of V's. Okay, and that's going to be helpful for you when you start your next row. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches. Okay, now the very important thing that you need to do before you start your next row is you need to chain. Okay, so just like we did at the bottom, where we were just pulling the yarn through the loop, you want to chain 1 stitch. Okay, that is going to make sure that your scarf is going to stay nice and even and stay the same width all the way across. If you don't chain, eventually what will happen is your project will start getting narrower and narrower and narrower. Okay, so I have my chain. All I'm going to do then is just turn my project so that I'm back at the beginning of my stitches. And remember what I said, where we've got this series of V's. Okay, so since we chained, what we can do is we can actually go in this first stitch. So it's going to be very similar to our previous row, but as I said, it's going to be a little easier. You're going to have a little more space between your stitches. That'll be easier to put your finger through. So all you're going to do is you are going to put your pointer finger through that first gap. You're going to go under both of those parts of the stitch, that part of the V, pull it through, and then you're going to pull it through both of the loops that are on your finger. And then you're going to grab the next space, pull it through, and then pull through. Now with crocheting and even knitting, it really is what's most comfortable for you as far as holding the yarn. Okay, I usually like to keep the yarn that's connected to the ball in my left hand, and I just kind of go between my pointer and my middle finger, and I like to hold the project both with my right hand between my pinky and my thumb, and then I also like to hold it with my left hand so I can kind of see where I'm going to be working next. So I'll put it through, pull through so I have 2 loops, and then pull the yarn through both the loops. And I'll go again to the end of my row. So you always want to find those 2 strands of yarn that create that stitch, and you want to go under both of them. So especially at the ends, you might have to look a little harder to find them, but you always want to go through under both of the strands. And then once again, once I've done that first stitch, I've got those 2 threads on there, I'm going to do a chain so that I can turn my whole project and I can start again with that first stitch. If you didn't chain, you wouldn't be able to do your stitch in this first stitch, and you would end up starting here, and that's where it would start getting narrower and narrower. And since you have so few stitches already, it won't take long before you've got a triangle instead of a rectangle. So I'll do 1 more row. Now, as we're working on this project, there aren't really going to be any additional instructions unless I have students that may be having some trouble and they need some extra videos or anything like that. So if you are having some difficulty and you think that you need maybe a different angle or just additional videos, please let me know so that I can do those. But for the most part, you're just going to continue and get certain lengths for the different weeks as your assignments. So this week, what I want you to do is I want you to roll your yarn into a ball, and I want you to do your chain and start your crocheting. And what I would like to see is that you crochet 10 inches, okay? That'll probably be about 15, actually, no, it'll probably be about 18 to 20 rows. So it shouldn't take you too long. Once you get the hang of it, it should be relatively easy for you, okay? But the biggest thing, the most important thing, as I said before, is that you want to make sure you chain and then turn your project. All right, so what I'm looking for is pictures of your ball of yarn. I would also like to see a picture of your chain. And then I want to see a picture of your 10 inches of your scarf. And then, as I said, for the next couple assignments, what you will be doing is just adding to that length. Now, if at any point you need to stop and you want to make sure that everything's not going to come apart, what you can do is you can, since you can't just leave your finger in there all the time like you would with a crochet hook, what you can do is you can just use a pencil or a pen or even a chopstick to hold your project in place. I have to get one more stitch here. So you always should have 8 stitches. I might have been talking too much and didn't chain correctly. I don't know. All right, so then I have my 8. And I'm gonna chain, all right? And like I said, if you need to stop, you just put a pen in, okay? And then you can just pull it tight, and then you can just leave it. And that way, you don't have to worry so much about the yarn potentially pulling out, okay? If you find, or if you feel like you've messed something up, crocheting is really nice that all you have to do is just gently pull, and it's going to take those stitches out. So if you find that you maybe missed a hole, like maybe you did this and then you skipped and you went here and you noticed that you did that and you want to go back, you can just pull it out. All right, so it's nice and easy in terms of fixing mistakes if you have any. And it's pretty easy to leave it and then go back to it. So I want 3 pictures for this week. Your ball of yarn, your first chain, okay, that chain that was right at the bottom, and then 10 inches of your scarf. And they'll all be posted to the Google Classroom assignment.